welcome back to Technical Tip Tuesday. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we're joined by our friends at iGuide who are sponsoring this month's technical tips. We're joined by Kayla Terrio, the National Account Executive at iGuide. Welcome back, Kayla.
Hi, Kayla. Thank you.
Yes, welcome back for our third tip of the month. And this one I think is a fun one because we're sharing best practices with the industry. So let's dive right in. What best practices should teams follow to create a true single source of truth using virtual tours, tags, and systematic documentation throughout the life of a loss?
Yes, Kayla, like we previously chatted about, it's amazing that we have the technology we have now in this industry, and it's becoming so commonplace, and people are relying on it to speed up their everyday workflows. However, I think we still have an issue with a lot of teams not utilizing the technology to the best of its ability. So, for instance, you mentioned the tags. Like we were talking about earlier, the virtual tours, these 360 virtual tours, the instant sketches, all of these technologies are valuable. However, there's more that we can do with them. So you're really trying to create a single source of documentation, a single source of truth for your loss. And that means adding as the project goes on, updating the file, just like you would anything else. You know, we're not in the days of taking millions of photos every day and adding them to a project file and naming all the files. Now, updating your documentation could mean maybe doing another scan of the property, maybe, when equipment's set, day two, or obviously post mitigation, it could simply mean just utilizing the tag features. A lot of technologies like iGuide, for instance, we have real time tags that in your virtual tour, while you're scanning the property, you can snap up close pictures of existing damages or maybe some evidence or something you want to point out about the loss and add it in real time to that virtual tour. You could also day two, day three, post mitigation, add additional photos as tags. Another thing I always recommend to different restoration companies, use the tag for your scope notes. You know, tags aren't just for adding photos to add more context for visual reference, but you could add scope notes, what you've done in that room, what you plan to do in that room. It can be a way for you to communicate with your team. Possibly a project manager adds notes in so that other team members, if they're filling in for them the next day, can read notes, and everything's just within one link and one project file. I would highly encourage teams to really play around with these technologies and see what they're capable of. Get creative, help yourself. You know, it may take a little time to learn a new skill, just like anything else. But once you get in the habit of really capitalizing on the investment that you've spent into this technology, I think it's going to pay for itself in spades because you're just speeding up efficiency and you're compiling all the data into one link, one document, one thing that you can share with a client or an insured to where all the notes and all the documentation about this loss are in a single place.
Yeah, and I would definitely say again, just leveraging the tools that you have to their full capacity. I don't know how many times we don't realize that we're not leveraging them the way that we can. You mentioned some really great opportunities to leverage said
Mhm.
technology, whether it's communicating with your team or documenting day one, two, three, so on. Because then again, communication, transparency, you're giving a full story, if you will. Most times, nowadays, unfortunately, people aren't coming and walking the site. And so they're really relying on us as their eyes and their ears and even providing them the notes, right? And then we know shift changes happen or new people come onto the job. So you want to have one central location, to your point, to have all that information because we don't want that phone tag game. We don't want that chicken scratch notepad game because that's how things get lost in translation. And really, our technology has helped us enhance our efficiency and effectiveness
Mhm.
substantially, right? To to your point, you don't have to take all of these photos. We mentioned earlier, you don't have to go get them developed. Don't know how many people have had to do that, but I remember those days. We would be lucky if we could get them in 24 hours, right? And now we have this instant gratification thanks to our technology. And I really blame Amazon for the instant gratification thing. And so, we're fortunate to have those things at our fingertips and leverage them. So it's really, really important to understand, just like you mentioned, tags. They're not just a generic place for one thing. You can leverage them on several different fronts for your team, what works for your team. And I think the really cool thing about technology is you can mold it to your business how you'd like. Yes, there's a basis of how it works, like you guys do at iGuide, but you and your team can determine how else you'd like to leverage that tool, right? I think that's really, really important. So, anything else to add before we sign off?
Yeah, for sure. One thing you just made me think of, and I see this more so on the fire investigation side. I work with a lot of fire experts. Um, I don't think teams are utilizing this ability with virtual tours, but different experts have figured out, hey, these virtual tours can be used for training. So you think about the pre-loss documentation you have, the middle of the job progress documentation, and then maybe a third scan for post-mid before rebuild. These virtual tours can be used after the fact, not just for documenting your claim, but training your team members. Bring them up as examples. Walk your team, your new project managers, your new lead technicians, walk them through these virtual representations of losses that you've done. Explain why you did the work that you did. Let them ask you questions about it. And it's a great way to not just do training while they're on site and following you, but after normal hours or something, you could sit through the loss with them through the virtual tour and use it as training. So there's a lot that we can leverage this technology for. And yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah,
Excited
and
to see how creative people get with it.
and I was gonna say, just to kind of like play off of what you're saying, training wise, it's also a great way to highlight the way your team is doing great in aspects of, documentation and telling a story. And it's also a way to learn from lessons that we found in the field that maybe didn't work right, or maybe we missed something. And so I think it's a really important tool to the success of our businesses every single day. You can, to your point, it doesn't just serve the purpose for that particular project or job. It can serve several purposes, especially when it comes to training. I think that's really, really important because now it's relevant to what you and your team do every single day. It's not you going to a training and you're like, this doesn't even apply to me. No, what you're learning and talking about is something that you're doing every day. You're using your past jobs. Well, that's it for this week's tip. We will see you next week on our Technical Tip Tuesday. Take care.